My husband and I had a pretty rough patch just before we got married. We had been together for 8 years, and he had basically lost interest in me and stopped having sex. I cheated with a random guy and we broke up. Awful move that I have always regretted, mostly because it was premeditated and not in the moment thing. He forgave me though and admitted to neglecting our relationship during that time. After a few weeks, we started speaking again and decided to wipe the slate clean. Things moved quickly and he proposed, and we got married a short while later. That was a long time ago, and we now have kids and a happy life. A few months ago, however, my husband's best friend made a new friend and introduced the guy to their group. By some karmic twist of fate, my husband's new friend was the guy I kissed all that time ago. I was so sick when I realized. I told my husband as soon as I knew, but at that stage, he had already been integrated into the friend group. To say he was angry was an understatement. He was so hurt and heartbroken and completely lashed out at me, which I get. After a few weeks he spoke to me and said he didn't want to get a divorce over this, but he is deeply embarrassed and ashamed, as am I. I was so glad to hear that he didn't want to break up, and I told him I would do whatever he is comfortable with in terms of coming clean. He has decided that he is going to forget we had the conversation and move on as though it hasn't happened. The most painful part though is that said if any of his friends ever find out, he will pretend he has no clue of anything and leave me on the spot. I am so sad and worried that the future of our family now depends on this, and the thing is, I know his friends already know. They haven't said anything because that would be rude, but I could tell something had shifted in their thinking towards me before I even realized about the guy. The air tenses when I come into the room, and a few of them have let things slip when they get drunk and they think they are being subtle. I've said this to Mai and his response was, "Oh, well, if it's ever said out loud I'm leaving you." I'm so sick with worry. I don't know what to do. It feels like my whole life is on a ticking time bomb. For a mistake I made and worked through with my husband over a decade ago. I completely understand his position, but I am racked with guilt, shame and worry and feel so trapped by it all. And I can't help but feel that my husband is basing our kids' happiness on chance for the sake of his ego. I am willing to come out and admit but he is too embarrassed to let people know he married me when he knew I had cheated. I don't know who or what is right or wrong, and I have no idea what is the best thing to do for our family. I am a mess lately and struggling to take care of myself and my kids, but it was my behavior that got us here, so I can't help think I need to put my head down and get on with it. I need some honest advice and perspective from someone who isn't so close to the situation or so emotional. I am too afraid to speak to anyone else about it. Please help. Why should I do? Story 2. I conducted a paternity test behind my wife's back on our 12-year-old son. A little backstory before I get to the meat. My wife and I met when I was 20. We had a drunk hookup the first night we met. We continued seeing each other after that night. A few weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. We stayed together and I proposed a few months later. I had doubts about her pregnancy lining up with our timeline, but I never brought it up or discussed it. Not to mention I was in the military and deployed a few months later. My proposal weighed a lot on her carrying my child. I grew up in a home without a dad and never wanted that. Fast forward 12 years, we are still married, though it has been extremely volatile and rocky. I've stayed together honestly because I could never part from my son. I can't let him grow up with an absent father, so I've made it work. Our marriage is dead outside of our child. I ran into an old friend who I knew around the time I met my wife. He asked if I was still with her and I said yes. He mentioned how it was crazy. I dated her, and then you stole her from me. I wasn't sure what he meant, and asked him to elaborate. He said it's no big deal, but I was seeing her up until that weekend. You met her. I dropped it, but inside my doubt and insecurities ran wild. I couldn't get it out of head. I broke down and bought a home DNA test kit and used it on my son and I without telling my wife. The results came back today. He is not my son. 0% chance I am his biological son. I'm destroyed. My whole world is upside down. I'm just on autopilot at the moment. I don't know how to act or feel. I'm just a zombie right now. One thing I know is no matter what, he is my son. I've been by his side the moment he was born and will absolutely never abandon him. Absolutely, nothing will change that. What I haven't decided is how, if at all, I bring it up to my wife. I feel like my whole marriage was a lie. I can't help but wonder if she knew. How do I confront her? Regardless that I'm not in love with her, I still love her. This will crush her. This will absolutely devastate her. I don't know what to do. I plan on seeing a counselor, therapist to S&P, so many emotions and thoughts flooding my mind. Just need some help.